Alright, gather round folks, because Uncle Three's got a story for you tonight, here on night 24 of the Ghost Storytelling channel. Tonight, I'm gonna tell you a tale about a ghost who was both terrifying and incredibly pitiful. This happened about 17 years ago, and it's a story sent in by a Filipino man who's actually older than me, Uncle Three. It's about his elementary school teacher's heartbreaking life. Back then, about 17 years ago, a young couple moved into his village to buy land. They were both teachers. The husband's name was Joshua, and the wife's name was Kaya. They were pretty young. They purchased a plot of land from an old lady in the village to build their home, and also acquired a rice field for farming. Word had it that teacher Joshua's family was really struggling. And to make matters worse, his mother and sister-in-law often bullied his wife Kaya terribly. They wouldn't let Kaya teach. They wanted her to stay home and do farm work, cook, and serve the husband's family. Teacher Joshua loved his wife deeply. This, understandably, led to conflict with his own mother. The young couple found their life unbearable and yearned for freedom. So they decided to leave and came to the storyteller's village. They were too afraid to go to Kaya's parents' home, fearing they would worry them. Eventually, by asking around, they learned about a plot of land for sale in this village and came to buy it. When the villagers heard their tragic story, everyone felt even more sympathy for them. The person who sent this story to Uncle Three, let's call him Mark, was teacher Joshua's student, and his house wasn't too far from the teacher's. So, whenever Mark's parents went fishing during the day, they'd take him along. But if they had to go out at night, Mark's parents would always send him to stay at teacher Joshua's house. The teacher and his wife taught at different schools. Kaya's school was a bit further, about a 30-minute drive. After teaching, they'd come home for a simple lunch, then hurry to work in the rice fields. In the evenings, they'd prepare their lesson plans together. This quiet, happy life continued for 5 peaceful years. Then, one day, no one knows how, someone told teacher Joshua's mother where they lived. And so one day, she showed up with her 2 daughters, ready to cause trouble. By pure coincidence, teacher Joshua was on leave that day and was home. He'd asked another teacher to cover his class. Mark's family, living nearby, heard the loud arguments and shouting. The gist of it was that Joshua's mother wanted him to leave his wife and come home with her immediately. She declared that if he didn't obey, their mother-son relationship would be severed from that day on. She even said that even if teacher Joshua died, he could die anywhere, but he would never be allowed to set foot in her house again. She disowned him completely. But of course, it was a family matter. So, Mark's parents and the neighbors, though they overheard, did feel it was appropriate to intervene. Later, while Mark's parents and other villagers were setting nets in the river, they heard a deafening scream echoing down the river. It was a sound filled with immense pain. Then, when Kaya returned from teaching, the villagers heard her shriek. That's when everyone urgently paddled their boats to shore. They rushed over to the house, and there he was, teacher Joshua, dead from drinking pesticide. He was curled up on the ground, clutching his stomach. His face was purple, and foam oozed from his mouth. Beside him lay an empty bottle of pesticide. People guessed he'd swallowed all the poison in the bottle. That first loud scream everyone heard, they figured it was Joshua's, his agonizing cry as the poison took hold and his insides burned. People couldn't help but say, if only he had gone to school that day like usual. His mother wouldn't have found him. If only that had happened, perhaps this tragic event would never have occurred. During teacher Joshua's funeral, some people offered to inform his mother's family. But his family was cruel. They completely abandoned their son, just as she had said, not caring at all. It was just as she had cursed him. Die wherever you want, but you're not allowed back in my house. So, the villagers helped out, laying him to rest. They buried him on the left side, right next to his house, under a giant mango tree. After teacher Joshua passed away, Kaya started taking on additional evening classes. As a result, her house was always closed and silent all day. The house looked desolate and eerie. People said that even a dry coconut falling from a tree would make them jump and run away in fright. Why were they so scared? Because the villagers often saw teacher Joshua. They'd see him at night while tending their rice fields or catching frogs. They'd see him wearing white trousers and a white shirt, standing by his grave, looking out. His face was purple, just like it was when he died. Sometimes people would see him standing there, waving and smiling, as if he was saying hello. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind was still, they'd hear a loud drumming sound coming from inside his house. Even teacher Kaya experienced it. One time, she came home from teaching, and as she stepped onto the porch, the front door opened by itself. Teacher Joshua was standing inside. He looked at her with such a sad expression. It was as if he had been waiting for her to come home for a very long time. Kaya was so startled that she fainted. Even though she loved her husband dearly, she was just a normal human, and a woman at that. Who isn't afraid of ghosts, right? She couldn't sleep alone at night because she constantly heard teacher Joshua's pained groans or the slap, slap, slap sound of his slippers. So, she asked Mark's parents if Mark could come and sleep with her. This went on for about a year. Overcome with grief and fear, she completely stopped eating and sleeping. She became skinny, weighing only about 30 kilograms. She tried her best to endure, but in the end, she couldn't take it anymore. She decided to move back to her parents' home and teach there. She only took a few personal items, clothes, an incense burner, and a photo of teacher Joshua. She left all the furniture, tables, and chairs behind. She didn't take anything else. Life went on for nearly 10 more years. By then, the dirt road that ran alongside the village's houses was replaced with a cement path. It was about a meter wide and spotless and neat. No more dirty dirt roads when it rained. During those 10 years, Kaya never remarried. Every time she returned to the village, she would clean the house. She'd also meticulously clean teacher Joshua's grave. She would arrange food, drinks, incense, and fruit as offerings. And then she would sit there and cry for a very long time. It was as if she were remembering a beautiful love story and remembering all the things that had passed, including harrowing memories. Then, once the incense burned out, she would pack everything up and leave. Little Mark, who was 10, was now a 20-year-old young man. But he was often pressured by the other kids at the village to sneak over to teacher Joshua's house and steal mangoes. Because around the teacher's house, there were a lot of mango trees, at least 20 of them. At first, Mark refused. It wasn't because he was afraid of ghosts, but because he respected teacher Joshua. He didn't want to trespass on the teacher's resting place. In his childhood memories, the teacher was like a second father or an older brother. Mark cherished teacher Joshua significantly. But at 20, he wasn't huge, nor was he small. He was constantly teased by the other kids in the village. Eventually, Mark got fed up. He didn't want to lose face anymore, so he agreed to go. That night, it was around 10 p.m. and pitch dark. Mark only brought a headlamp. He led the way, with the other kids following behind. It was incredibly quiet all around. For some reason, even the frogs weren't croaking that night. When they arrived, Mark decided to pick from the tree closest to the teacher's grave. It was a big tree, and its branches hung low, full of fruit, making them easy to pick. After picking the mangoes, the whole group sat on teacher Joshua's porch to eat. Mark took the biggest mango, used a small knife one of the others brought to cut it in half, and set one half aside. He quietly whispered an invitation for teacher Joshua to join them and eat. As they were all sitting there eating, the air suddenly turned noticeably cold. Usually, you might think it's just goosebumps or your imagination, a chill running down your spine. But this time, it had been a very hot night, and the temperature dropped so suddenly and clearly that everyone felt it. And then, another thing, they heard the distinct sound of slippers. Slap, slap, slap. One of the younger kids looked behind Mark, and oh my goodness, there was teacher Joshua. He was standing in the house, slowly walking out. He was wearing a stark white shirt. The moment everyone saw him, they turned tail and ran. Mark, with the headlamp still on, slowly turned around. He didn't know if teacher Joshua's spirit did it on purpose or not, but the lamp's beam landed right on him, and Mark saw that it was truly teacher Joshua. The teacher's face looked ice cold, but for some reason, he seemed a little happy. Maybe it was because it had been a long time since children had come to visit his house. Mark, still scared, left his sandals and ran off. Teacher Joshua just stood there, shaking his head, probably meaning, "You invited me to eat, and then you all ran away. What's the deal with that?" In the following days, those kids were so scared that they actually got sick. At night, they'd mumble things in their sleep. Their families questioned them, and their parents scolded them. But, truth be told, whenever teacher Joshua's ghost appeared, he only showed himself. He had never harmed anyone or put anyone in danger. One day, a young couple, a man named Dan and his wife, moved into the village. Dan had heard and seen that the teacher's house had a beautiful design. Even though it had been left empty for so long and was covered in moss and dust, he really liked it. So he sought out Kaya to discuss renting the house, including the price and everything. Dan and his wife's daily business was sitting by the bridge at the commune market. Whenever someone brought crabs or shrimp to sell, they'd buy them. Then they'd resell them elsewhere for a profit. They didn't have a fixed place to live. They'd only been doing this for about a year, but business was thriving. His wife wore gold all over her hands. However, because she was doing so well, Dan's wife became arrogant. She was haughty and looked down on others in her speech and mannerisms. Neighbors wondered why this couple dared to rent a house known to be haunted by teacher Joshua's ghost. They thought the couple was courageous. Dan and his wife heard these comments, but they just sneered. They said they didn't believe in ghosts. And even if there were ghosts, they weren't afraid. They had lived there for over a month, but hadn't bothered to greet any of the surrounding neighbors. They'd just go to work, weigh crabs and shrimp, then come home to eat and sleep. not socializing with anyone. One day, Dan's wife got into an argument with a neighbor. The reason was that the neighbor's chickens had come over to their yard and pooped on Dan's porch. Dan's wife grabbed a broom and chased them. She was so furious that she caught a chicken and drowned it. The neighbor spoke gently, saying, "If there's a problem, just tell me. I'll put up a fence so they don't bother you anymore." "Why did you kill my chicken?" But Dan's wife just cursed and swore, even threatening to throw the neighbor's ancestral altar into the river. Seeing how vicious Dan's wife was, the neighbor eventually fell silent and let it go. You'd think that was the end of it, but that night, as she lay in bed, she was still complaining to Dan about the incident. But as she was ranting, she suddenly noticed Dan's eyes had become cloudy and strangely glazed over. Then, just a moment later, in a split second, Dan raised his hand and slapped his wife several times across the mouth. "Bum, bum!" As he slapped her, he said, "In my house," still talking loudly, "Be quiet, I want to rest." After that, Dan closed his eyes and fell into a dead sleep. He didn't seem to know anything. Normally, Dan doted on his wife. Something like this would never happen. At this point, his wife finally understood. She realized that Teacher Joshua's ghost must have possessed her husband, because ever since they moved here, she'd heard the neighbors' many rumors. But she still wasn't scared. She kept grumbling to herself for a while before falling asleep. In the middle of the night, as she slept, she felt a heavy sensation on her mouth and face. It felt itchy and prickly. When she tried to scratch it, it hurt, like a burn. It felt like worms crawling under her skin. A really uncomfortable sensation she couldn't touch. When Dan woke up the next day, the moment he saw his wife's face, he almost fell over. From her mouth all the way up to her face, it looked like she had severe shingles with hard, red bumps. They were thick and clustered like scorched rice. Absolutely disgusting to look at. Her husband quickly got a mirror for her to look at. And in the mirror, besides her hideous, monstrous face, there was a second face, Teacher Joshua's. He looked furious. Dan was so startled that he dropped the mirror, shattering it. After a moment, the couple calmed down. Her husband suggested they seek a doctor to get cured. But Dan's wife was too embarrassed to go out with a face like that. She stubbornly refused. She stayed home and tried applying sliced young bananas to her face. She also bought medicine to take, but the more she applied bananas or took medicine, the thicker the spots became. They didn't improve at all. She couldn't eat or brush her teeth, just lay there moaning for days. Throughout those days, Dan and his wife stopped working. Since his wife was in such a state, Dan took over all the housework, sweeping, cooking, and cleaning the yard. There were a lot of mango trees around Teacher Joshua's house, and so many leaves fell. Dan got annoyed with sweeping and decided to cut down 2 trees in front of the house. Then he looked to the side and saw the most enormous mango tree near the teacher's grave. Its branches spread everywhere, reaching the side of the house and even the windows. So he decided to climb up and trim those branches to tidy them up. But instead of climbing from the trunk of the tree, he climbed onto Teacher Joshua's grave to stand there and trim the closer branches. As he was hanging onto a branch, chopping away, he heard a voice say, "How dare you cut down my tree?" He immediately looked up and saw Teacher Joshua sitting on a higher branch, looking furiously at him. Dan screamed, then fell to the ground with a thud. The fall left him completely motionless on the spot. His wife, hearing the commotion inside the house, ran out, screaming. Neighbors also rushed over to help. They took him to the local clinic. The doctors there examined him and told them to take him to a bigger hospital. He had a broken arm and several broken ribs. But it was strange because the mango tree wasn't that tall from the ground. It was very odd for him to fall and sustain such severe injuries. And it was even stranger how his wife's face got such severe shingles, so thick, in just one night. When these incidents occurred, people started to speculate. They said it was because Dan and his wife were so arrogant and competitive in life. That's why teacher Joshua's ghost intentionally appeared to teach them a lesson. Later, after Dan recovered, he and his wife returned the house to Kaya. They moved away to some unknown place. From that day on, teacher Joshua and Kaya's house was closed once more and has remained abandoned ever since. That's the story for night 23 actually, tonight's story, sent to Uncle 3 by our friend Mark. In this story, the ghost truly never harmed anyone. As long as we don't do anything to disrespect them, they won't do anything to affect us. If anything, teacher Joshua's spirit only appears because of the sadness and resentment in his heart. He lost his life for reasons that had nothing to do with him. And when he does appear, he only appears in his own house. That's why Uncle 3 said at the beginning that this is a story about a ghost who is both scary and pitiable. Goodbye everyone, and see you next time on Night 25.